people. Hello there. Hello. How are you today? I can see you. I can see you already. I'm not sure if you can yet see me, but I can see you already. Yes, I can. People. Oh, yes, I can. Hello. Good morning. Good morning, Angie and Crazy Bunny and Shin and Healing the Silence and Derek. And let me just put on the recording because otherwise I'll be in trouble if I don't record this. How are you all today? Recording in progress. I hope you are tremendously well. It is fabulous to see you here today. Good morning, hope, love, and peace. And Matt T and Maria R and Tony Griffiths and Space Cat and Veggie Wise, Maria, Rowie, Julie C, Merv, Pink Diamond. I'm keeping up with you. I'm keeping up with you. How the devil are you all? Good morning, Armand. Whoop. Hello, London lady. Yes, you were first. Yes, you were first. Hello, Matt. Hi from New Zealand. Hope your weather's better than ours, Matt. What a washout all weekend. Shockingly bad. Morning, Jocelyn. CJ Law. Good morning, Soul Rebel. Hello, Marshall, Juice Terry, Gilly MC, Mike Brownless, Derek C, GD, Kim Wildman, Terry Watson, Good Ship, Lollipop. Always makes me feel happy when I hear that. Sonia Todd. Good morning. And you spell your name IA as well. Good morning to you, Sonia. Hello, Janice. Morning from South Yorkshire. What's the weather like up there? What was happening in Manchester yesterday? Do you know anything about that, Janice? Where there was problems with cars like crashing, weird stuff. I've been looking for updates online today. Not a great deal. Morning, Tina. You're in Wicklow in Ireland, are you? Good morning to you. What's the weather like over there on the Emerald Isle? And good morning, Alina and Peter and Ito. Oh, so many, Maria. Hello, everybody from Australia, says Maria. We literally have people from all around the world. Cheryl, good morning to you. She said it's rainy in Cornwall. I absolutely love how global we are, whether you believe in a flat earth or not. We are global, and it is wonderful to have you all here with me today. Thank you so much for being here. It is brilliant. Busy day on the show. We'll be looking at the aftermath of the UK elections, as well as what is going on with the French elections. We'll also update on the sentencing of Lucy Letby, and we will also reflect on 7/7. The bombing attack in central London that happened 19 years ago yesterday. So all of this together with your letters and comments and, well, don't go anywhere for at least the next hour and possibly more. How are you today? Thank you as ever for your emails, messages, donations, and any kind of contribution that makes this show unmissable. Yes, I said it, and what? I'm in a feisty mood today. Won't betide anyone who gets in my way this week. I'm on a mission, and not even a speeding train can get in the way of me right now. Oh no. So on that note, let's do this. Right. First of all, a message, or a letter rather, an email even, from Jack. Jack wrote, "Hello, Sonia. It was so weird you were talking about epiphanies on Friday because I literally had one last Monday and it led to me handing in my notice in my banking job. I realized that I only do this job for money, but I have earned and I've saved and I've still not pursued my true dream. I want to set up a craft store online for my hobby, which is making and painting miniature clay figures. I love it and always have done and have never pursued it in the way that my heart tells me I should. But I want to, and I'm so glad to hear you talking about epiphanies because it felt like a sign." That's wonderful to hear, Jack. I'm really glad to hear that. I am a multiple epiphany type of person. And also, when you set up your online store, come on the stream and talk about the importance of following your dreams. We'd love to hear you. And the Lucy Letby sentencing. Well, Friday was the sentencing of former neonatal nurse Lucy Letby, who was convicted of a further attempted murder of a baby. This now totals convictions of murdering 7 babies and convictions for the attempted murder of 7 babies, all of which she denies and which there is a substantial body of people who agree with her. The response to our interview from Friday with Professor Richard Gill has been absolutely brilliant. Professor Richard Gill is an extremely knowledgeable individual. He's been involved in getting two other nurses who have been similarly convicted to Lucy Letby, and he's been involved in getting them exonerated because they were miscarriages of justice, which he suspects is what's happened to Lucy Letby. And we will be doing much more on this story, as you know. So the sentencing, this followed the 34-year-old being found guilty earlier in the week. The jury took less time to deliberate than it takes for me to go to the shops, frankly, an astonishing 3+ hours to decide that she was guilty. This followed a retrial at Manchester Crown Court. She was already serving 14 whole life orders after being convicted last year. And the jury in her original trial had been unable to reach a verdict on the charge that she had also attempted to murder a premature baby known as Baby K in February 2016. Miss Letby was in court on Friday to hear Judge Mr. Justice Goss tell her the attempted murder was, in quotes, another shocking act of calculated, callous cruelty. He added, during the course of this trial, you have coldly denied any responsibility for any offences and sought to attribute wrongdoing to others. You have no remorse. He then reiterated to Lucy Letby that she would spend the rest of her life in prison. And as she was led from the dock, she turned around and said, I'm innocent. Many people believe her, and if she is indeed innocent, then that would explain why she has denied responsibility and suggested that there may be other reasons for what happened, which is what she's done. It would also certainly explain why she has no remorse, because if she is indeed innocent, then remorse is not the emotion that one feels. The big question right now is Lucy Letby a scapegoat for institutional failings in the National Health Service? And is this a cover-up? And if it is, then we are looking at one of the biggest miscarriages of justice in contemporary Britain. Let me know your thoughts, people. Are you swayed in any way? Marsh Girl says, Jack, let us know your stall online when it's set up and how it's going for you. Really great move and rewarding and good for your mind and soul and peace. All the best. We love it, Jack. We love that you're following your dreams. Healing the Silence says, when you look back to the police interview and Lucy is sitting, she doesn't even look guilty. She looks distressed and wondering how on earth she could be charged with such offences. Shin wants to know, what did Lucy see, read or hear? Good morning, CL76. Marie Lowe says she so is. Miscarriage of justice, Marie, yeah? Cavan said, has Lucy asked for a lie detector test? I don't know, is the short answer, Cavan. I don't know about that at all. Yeah, terrible situation, frankly, not great at all. And it's an awful situation, isn't it? When you're, imagine if she is innocent. And imagine if all of that has happened and she's an innocent person, what then? And this is how easy it is to be demonized by media. And some of the things that she said and was written, as was pointed out by Professor Gill, such as those diary notes that we've heard so much about, they were taken out of context. What she was actually saying is, that's what they say about me. But people took it as, that's what I say about myself. No. That isn't what actually went down. So I think this is interesting. Petition for Lucy still online, says Shin. There it is. Put it in the live stream, which is absolutely great. Good morning, Sonia, from both of us, says Wayne. Good morning, lovely Wayne. Rowie thinks the lawyers on both sides should have to take a polygraph test too. Wouldn't that be interesting, Rowie, if we started to introduce polygraph tests for lawyers? Oh my God, they'd be off the scale, mate. They'd be off the scale. What do I think of common law? Is it better than the Napoleonic system they have in continental Europe? Oh, small question to a big answer there, Rowie. I have lots of mixed feelings about it, frankly. Snib's in the house. Good morning, Snib. Messier, please lead us. Oh my God, forgive me for making an absolute pig's ear of that. I'm just going to call you 45 because that's the number in your name. I never believed in Lucy Letby's conviction. There have been too many other cases, always against nurses, that echo Letby's case. Healing the Silence says, I wonder how many people know what happened but are feeling silence. That's all I say about now. Christine says she spoke out about the conditions in that department, which is why, in my opinion, she has been targeted. Interesting. Very interesting indeed. So I'm going to bring in our first guest. Let's not even hang around, frankly. Let's bring in our first guest. And he's going to help me to look at what's been going on with all the election madness that has taken place. And he's not actually Vicky Appleby. I appreciate that's exactly what it says on there. Hello there. Hello there. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good
Good
morning.
morning.
There he is. Lovely Hayden Appleby. Good morning, Hayden. How are you?
Good morning. I'm wonderful, Sonia. How are
Of
you?
course, you are wonderful. I am wonderful too. Really very excited about this week for all manner of reasons. But I'm love
hmm
having you on. It's absolutely brilliant. You are, of course, the host of the Utter Truth with Hayden Appleby podcast. You're a journalist. And one of the things that you said, which I particularly love, is sorry, I won't be bored. What made you say that, Hayden?
Well, of course, when we look in the political establishment, Sonia, or in this case, journalists, what we might call the media class, the media establishment, what we often see is individuals who are bought. They might be bought by what we call a deep state, people acting for their own influences behind the scene and influencing our lives, our politics, or whatever it may be. There are individuals everywhere in this system we currently have who are bought, who are corrupt, and who do belong to an establishment class. So I wanted to make it really clear that
Yeah.
we're not all like that, and that hopefully some of us, like you, hopefully like I, can provide a voice to independent media free from that establishment corruption.
See, I love that. I love it, not least because I absolutely adhere to that, but also
hmm
because you're in a different generation to me. So it's really wonderful to see our new generation of journalists coming up with this no compromise attitude. Because if there is one profession in the world where you shouldn't be able to be bought, it
Yeah.
should be journalism. It
hmm
absolutely should. And I'm not talking about being paid a decent wage. We should be paid a decent wage to do journalism. We should put value on journalism. And often people think, oh, you can just do it for free or you can just. No, we don't do that. That's not how it should be. Journalism should be absolutely valued for what it is. But I completely concur with you. So thank you for joining us and
Yes.
outlining that. So let's crack on. We're going to look at elections in the UK, do a post mortem on what's gone on in the UK.
Mm.
Keir Starmer's new appointments, some very interesting ones in there, of course. Some of his own comments that he made about, like the reset, for example, or different things like that. But let's have a little look at what's been going on in the French elections overnight. Hayden, what have you been picking at? Not Hayden. Yes, Hayden. Sorry. Do you know what? For some reason, I just suddenly switched your name around. I might be dyslexic, people. Hayden, what have you been picking up about the French elections?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting. What we are being told is taking place is this kind of left wings. Some might call them far left, but of course
Mm,
we're not allowed to call them that. They can call us far right, but
right,
there
right.
are double
Great
standards,
points.
as we know. But we've seen this left-leaning coalition win most of the seats, apparently, pushing the far right, quote unquote, national rally into third place. And this has shocked a lot of people because, we thought this was some great revolution of the French people standing against the establishment and everything. But I think that we should not dismiss that idea, just like because we have a Labour government now in the UK, we should not dismiss the idea that the British public may still be awake, but I'm sure we'll look at that in a moment. But what we've seen overnight are mass kind of protests, riots, a lot of chaos on the streets of France. The great Lewis Brackpool, a friend of mine who I'm interviewing next week, has been covering it over in France. And it's been absolute chaos. And what it appears to display are kind of these Antifa style individuals causing absolute obliteration on the streets. So, what's taking place in the elections is interesting, and we need to really keep an eye on that because I think these things can get a little bit dodgy. But what's fascinating is how right now these individuals are on the streets, they're causing chaos, even though they appear to have got their intended outcome. So it's
Interesting.
like, would that have taken place either way? Oh, we're just doing it to fight the far right, it's for the greater good. But now you're doing it, what, because, some form of celebration. So
Right,
I
right.
do believe there are individuals who this isn't about civil disobedience. This is just
No.
about breaking the law, causing chaos. And we need to separate those people from individuals like you and I who are anti-establishment. We do not belong in the same group.
It's a funny situation, isn't it, that we've reached? Where, see, now I was born what would have once been termed on the left. I come from a working
Yeah.
class family. We voted Labour. I grew up voting Labour. It would have been unheard of for me to have voted Conservative. I'm now politically homeless, and I don't trust any of them simply because I know the reality of what goes on. But it is interesting, isn't it, what is going on in both the UK and France, that we are saying when these far left parties get in that this is not the establishment, which
Mm.
is really hilarious, isn't it? So it's like they want to convince us that there isn't some sort of handover of power. And I am not of the belief that elections are rigged as such. We know they're rigged to a
Mm.
certain degree because it's a uni-party system, but I
Yeah,
don't necessarily believe that they're rigged in terms of the voting and all of that, right?
agreed.
So because I think that's just a little bit too far and it doesn't even make sense. It doesn't add up. But nonetheless, what do you think this says about for Macron in terms of the globalists?
See, I think it says ultimately before this moment that people are turning away from him and people are rejecting him. And now we kind of have this coalition that's supposedly won the most seats, going to be taking power, etc. And so I think it shows above all else whether individuals are turning far left, whether they're turning far right, whatever you want to label it, there is a desire to kind of break free from an establishment feel,
Yes,
you know,
yes,
over here, which we will touch on. Labour, Conservative, Macron's government, wherever it may be, there is a desire to, whatever your political motivations and affiliations might be, to kind of break free from the parties that are infiltrated with corruption. And I think everyone is feeling that, all citizens, the French, the Americans, the British. And I'm hoping we can continue moving in that kind of populist direction and keep our eye on the French elections because that will definitely act, I think, as kind of just like the UK one has so far, act as an almost guiding light of where
mm,
the international public, the sentiments we're
mm,
all feeling, if that makes sense.
It makes absolute sense, right? Let's have a look at the UK elections. I noted that there is a massive increase in spoilt ballots. I'm hearing
Mm,
reports that in some constituencies, as many as 300 spoilt ballots were returned, right? Which is really interesting. So we know this wasn't a vote for Labour, this was a vote against Conservatives, wasn't it?
absolutely. And that's kind of what I've tried to reflect through all my reporting. This was not some big, like I feel it was portrayed in the mainstream media.
Mhm.
This was not some big, turn to Labour, this new profound love for Labour. In fact, if we look actually at the statistics, we now have a government that only got 34%
Right,
of the vote.
right.
This was not some love for Keir Starmer or his government. Like you say, this was a hatred, a rejection of the current government. And actually, we saw 14% of the vote, whatever you think of them individually, go to an independent party, Reform UK. And as you say, many, many, many ballots were spoiled. So the idea that this was the entire British public turning totally left to the party they so trust, Labour, is complete baloney to me, Sonia. This was actually, I do believe, even though they can call it a super majority, they can call it what they like. When you look at the actual votes and you look at the feel among the British public, when you look at the fact that I believe it was 4% of individuals who voted Labour actually agree with their policies, and near 30% voted for them, as you say, to get the Tories out. This was an anti establishment
Yes.
revolution, even if it resulted in a Labour government.
That's right. Even if it resulted in another establishment
Yeah.
party, but absolutely right. I mean, that is the reality, right? This was a protest vote, but how
Yes.
utterly uninspiring that we choose our leaders based on who is the least reprehensible, though, Hayden. That's a
Yeah.
terrible way around it, isn't it? And the thing is that I was not really a supporter of reform or any of them. But I have to say that the people who were supporting reform were supporting reform with their whole hearts and with their whole chest and were passionate and inspired by that. What was your thoughts about that?
Exactly, 100%. I think, you know, individual loves, pet peeves for, reform. I think it very much kind of mirrors the Trump campaign and the Trump administration in the US. Whatever you think about them individually, they both have a support base that it's not this, oh, I'm going to vote for you just as a tactical vote, to
Right.
get the other one out. It's actually, no, I do agree with your policies. If you speak to reform voters, a lot of them, they'll be portrayed in the media as these rough, hooligans who
Yeah.
don't actually know anything.
All
No,
right.
yeah, yeah, yeah. They actually, when you speak to them, they know a lot about the manifesto. They know when reform support income tax, their plans with immigration, net zero, the BBC. So actually, they, as you say, have this kind of love and admiration for Nigel Farage, just like Trump supporters have it for Trump. And that is, as we say, often portrayed as some form of madness, oh, they're idolizing them. I would actually argue it's more, no, they're supporting them. We are just so kind of brainwashed and indoctrinated to believe that we shouldn't really support politicians. We should just, as you say, put our vote to the
Yeah.
one that's a little bit less evil, the one that's a little bit less corrupt, the
Right.
one that wasn't quite as wicked on that issue, but was on that one. And
Terrible.
yeah, it really is, it is an establishment, it is a system. And if we want to talk about rigged elections, I do believe it was rigged, not by an individual,
Go
not
on.
by a party, but by the system itself, by the
100%.
system,
That I absolutely agree with you. Yes,
by
it
the
is. It's set
system.
up in a certain way, isn't it? It is rigged in that
Absolutely.
respect.
Yeah, by the system that can make it so that parties that get more votes get 7, 8 times less seats. A system that can actually not represent democracy, and a system that gives us two options, both which belong to the same backside, which is owned by the same establishment. So yeah,
Abs
it's all down to the
absolutely.
system.
Absolutely. WEF is alive and well in the House of Commons, no doubt about it. Now,
Absolutely.
they reconvene tomorrow and they'll be electing their new speaker. Lindsay Hoyle will probably get back in again. 334 new MPs are arriving from all parts of the UK. That's going to be absolute chaos. When
Mm,
when there's always a new sitting in the House, it's like they have to be guiding all of these new people. This is what you do. This
yeah.
is how we conduct ourselves, and this is going to be absolute chaos tomorrow. Going to be very interesting. Let's
Yes.
I mean, some of the interesting things that have already happened tells us that this is in many respects just a handover of power. So one example, the new Defence Secretary, John Healey, immediately this weekend attended a commemoration service in Ukraine rather, with President Zelensky committed to providing more weapons. And that's just on day 3 of Keir Starmer's new government. So nothing's really changed there, right?
No, nothing's changed at all. In Rishi Sunak's leaving speech, he mentioned Ukraine. Labour get in. The first thing Keir Starmer does is this kind of, I don't know if you've seen it, Sonia, Zoom call with President Biden,
Didn't
where
see, I've seen
President
an image of it. I didn't see the
yeah,
actual
yeah.
call.
And of course, they then discuss Ukraine. It's the first thing they discuss. And you have to ask, it does not make you far right to ask, why is the British government, the American government, their first priority is the military industrial complex, sending money to Ukraine, to Israel, to everywhere. Except, you would have thought that would be kind of priority 10 after sorting out the chaos in this country, the country they supposedly represent. But
Hmm.
this links back to how we started this conversation. It's
Right.
because they don't represent us.
No.
They work for a deep state of influences, and one of those influences, perhaps even one of the biggest one, as big as Big Pharma, as big as the media, is that military complex.
Sure
They make a
is.
lot of money, they fund a lot of money, and so nothing has changed. And I am
No.
tired of people, and there's not many people, but the few people that say that Labour are totally different, that, change. This is all Starmer's motto has been, vote change. There is no difference here. Like we said, they're all owned by the WEF.
Yeah.
They are all a part of this establishment. and there's no opposition. And that is why I think the British people, why so many of us did spoil our ballots, like myself, spoiler alert, is because we are tired of having no opposition
Right.
in Westminster. We are tired of having parties that tweet out and give and repeat the same mottos and manifestos. You know, Keir Starmer and Rishi, they both had this safe and effective narrative. They both supported the lockdowns. They both are on the same with Ukraine. They both, neither of them supposedly stopped these boats. I mean, are they actually any different when we look at what they do, what they
No,
say, who they are, or
no.
is this
And
all
I'm going to,
theatre?
well, here's the thing. I'm going to bring you on to the next thing where they are so similar. And that is obviously Keir Starmer's team has a strong whiff of Blair, doesn't it? And
Mm,
lo and behold, Blair is back to say his piece. He wanted digital ID for the longest time. And literally within days of the Labour getting back into power, he's talking about introducing ID cards and the importance of that. Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds has ruled out Tony Blair's suggestion that Labour should introduce ID cards to deal with migration. But who believes them? Quite seriously, can you see? Because the thing is, once they've got ID cards, digital ID, that will then be part of the 2030 frame in place that they're all working towards anyway.
yeah.
What do you think about? Are they likely? Is Labour going to be behind ID cards?
Well, first of all, I think it's really incredibly manipulative the way in
Hmm.
which Blair's doing this because he knows how important the issue of immigration is to the
Right,
British
right.
public. And so offering ID cards as a solution, you know, if Labour was just to say, "Oh, we're gonna give ID cards," you know, there would be many of us, I'm sure, who would revolt, who would stand against it. But if it's offered as this grand solution to the number one issue for a lot of people, that's very crafty, I think.
It
But
is manipulative. You're right,
mm,
actually. That is
mm,
exactly what it is. By the way, did you see that very weird dress that Akshata Murthy, Rishi Sunak's wife, was wearing? The blue and white thing, red thing. Somebody sent
mm,
me a picture of a Tesco carrier bag, which looks incredibly similar, but I felt there was something in that dress. It didn't feel like a straightforward dress, but that might just be me. So let's talk about,
mm.
before you leave us today, let's just talk about some of the people who have been appointed to the cabinet. He's obviously made a whole series of people lords and sirs in order to be able to do that. For example, he has appointed Sir Patrick Vallance. I'm going to be talking about that afterwards, but I just like, we have to be really careful. YouTube live stream, they don't like anything that they term medical
Yes.
misinformation, so we have to be careful. But what do you think about some of his appointments?
Well, it's very interesting, isn't it? Because it almost, like we've said, rings kind of similar deja vu of the government before him, again, appointing the same individuals, even with Trump and Biden in the US, both appointed, both supported Anthony Fauci.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you really do, again, start with this beginning question of whether these parties are any different. I don't see how you can reach a result or a conclusion that isn't no, they aren't. And I don't see how the solution then cannot be to have an anti-establishment revolution. And so, yeah, Valence, this will, or it'll be very interesting what takes place here. I think a lot of the British public, actually, even just individuals you talk to on a day-to-day basis, they're very much with COVID now awake to a lot of issues and have a lot of complaints regarding it. So I don't know how this will go down, but are we surprised? I
No,
thought maybe they'd be a little bit more discreet about who they'd appoint, about the kind of
yeah,
figures and
yeah,
influences they have. But
yeah.
there we are. Why be discreet when ultimately no one can stop you? But we can,
We
maybe in
can.
the future.
We can. Let's read some of these comments. Red Scotland, so many comments. Thank you for joining us this morning. Red Scotland, oh my God, they're flying past so quickly. Red Scotland said, sovereigns do not display ID. We are all sovereign entities of God. Take up your sovereignty, people. We love that. Call to arms,
Absolutely.
not a violent call to arms, a
Yes.
metaphorical call to arms. The revolution we need is a revolution of the mind. That is what we need. Ant Silk said Blair should be in prison. I mean, but over which charges, though, Anne? They are multiple. They really are. And Marie points out that most people get their info off social media. Hashtag doomed. And if I speak, Rowie says, if I speak my mind to these people, I am met with Oh, Rowie, that went very quickly. I've missed it. Sorry. Something like I met with ridicule. Oh, I met ridicule. The politicians I have spoken with always treated me with respect, ironically. That's interesting.
Hmm.
Um, I've no idea. I assume Merkel is still alive, Pixel. I've no idea about that. Um, yes, it would be lovely if everyone treated everyone with respect, but that is not the world we live in. And D Hall points out that Patrick Vallance is part of the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. That's interesting, you see. And it goes on, really. Yeah, Mandy, absolute war crimes is only the start of it. Dr. David
Yes,
Kelly included. I think Blair should absolutely be looked into regarding Dr. David Kelly, which we will cover in a
absolutely.
future show. Hayden, thank you so much for joining us
Thank
this
you.
morning. Been an absolute pleasure to have you with us. Come again. We really enjoyed it. Have a brilliant week. Really
Hmm.
enjoyed this week. I don't know what's the weather like where you are.
It's lovely, actually.
It's shining and sunny now.
Yeah,
Whereas,
shining.
yeah, it's shining. Oh god, that's a bit scary. That reminds me again of all these memes that have popped up over
Oh
Ash
no.
Carter's Murty. One of them was from The Shining. You know where the two twins are down the end of the hallway. I'm not even going to go into this anymore. It's naughty. Hayden, take good care of
Love
yourself.
it.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much.
Lovely. Take care. Bye. Great to have him with us. Yes, he's kickstarted us off nicely. Get rid of your smartphones. I'm tired of thinking. Yes, I saw that, Annie. Bob Moran's cartoon with Sunak throwing the keys to Starmer with a bit of wefting in the background. Absolutely. Yeah, faking sentiment is one of their most prized skills, says Shug. I hear you loud and clear, Shug. I'm going to welcome in my next guest because it's that kind of day today, people. Yes, it is. It's that kind of day. I'm going to come back on the details about Patrick Vallance and my own observations about what has taken place over the last few days, including guess what happened during the general election, guess what was hidden during the general election. But I will cover that after I talk with Sean. Good morning, Sean.
Good morning. Hello, Sonia. Nice to see you.
Good to have you with us, everybody. This is Sean Parker. He's a writer, artist, musician, cultural commentator, you name it. He's published and contributed to a number of books. He's done a TED Talk, and his book, Compelling Speech, The Stammering Enigma, won a Platinum Coastler Arts Award in 2023. I hope I've pronounced that correctly, Sean. And I talk about that book, The Compelling Speech, The Stammering Enigma, because you, of course, you do have a stammer, and you and I have talked about that in the past. You've not allowed it to get in your way in any way, though, have you, Sean?
Well, that's correct. I have a stammer. I've identified as a stammerer since I was 5, which means I've had one. And just over, I, I used to be an English teacher in Istanbul for 10 years. And over that period of practice, of speaking practice, like we do, it got to a very handleable degree. So it'll always be there. And I'm not afraid of it being there because that's the main problem when you angst over it, as most stammerers will know. That's what the block is. And it makes the block worse. So with communication like this and the promotion of books, it does tend to go somewhere else. So yeah.
All good, all good. This is your new book. It is called Delicate Balance of Reason. I've been reading it. It asks lots of good questions about the cultural show we're in the middle of at this moment in time. Adventures in the Culture Wars, it's called. And talk to me about cancel culture, Sean. You're not a fan of it, are you?
No, you could say that. I've been, as the culture wars, which you cover so brilliantly over
Thank
the
you.
last sort of 10 years, have just seemed to get crazier and crazier. And as a the part of me that's a journalist, I mean, I'm an artist specifically, it's how I see myself, but there's an edge of me that's journalistic, and that's where this book comes from, of watching all that stuff, watching the cancellations, watching the Depp Heard trial and whichever side of the things you come at that
Right,
with,
right.
for example. And then, of course, the COVID business, I don't go into massively in there because people like you and Richard Bobes and people like this cover it so well with
Thank
such
you.
good guests and things. What am I going to add? But so many of us are very simpatico on it. And I've tried to bring out the possible humor, but it's not funny book, is it? But there's a certain edge of humor in it, which I've tried to bring out into people.
It's a good point you make about myself and Richard Bobes. I'm actually going to read you a quote where you talk about us briefly. It's chapter 16, Conspiracy Theory or Counter Discourse. And I think that's a very interesting distinction there, right there. And you talk about how it's okay for some commentators, such as, for example, Laura Dodsworth, to talk about some topics. Actually, let me read it to you. Ex-Mumford and Son, Winston Marshall, can talk to Laura Dodsworth about her new book on how the state weaponized fear amongst its citizens. But because it's a podcast on Spectator TV, it gets a pass. So you're already making a distinction between that which is acceptable, probably in the eyes of the establishment, and that which isn't. And then you come to me and Richard, when Sonia Poulton or Richard Phobes do the same on their channels to not dissimilar viewer numbers, I would argue actually more half the time, they will be immediately rabbit holed. And I think that's a really important distinction, because I would argue that I'm absolutely more of a journalist than Laura Dodsworth. So why is it that I and Richard would get rabbit holed and she wouldn't? What do you think is behind something like that?
Because you're telling the truth. And it's not that she isn't. I'm not going to comment on it, but they have a narrative. And as we've seen through your career progression, if I can use that term,
Yeah,
you don't do the narrative. You do your own version of following your nose, and that's what's so compelling about this sort of channel and Richard's and independent media in itself, and they ignore it. And I mean the mainstream media at their peril. Not a threat. It's an observation of numbers. People go to the stuff like you make, and we keep away from This Morning or whatever else is on there. I've no idea what's because people don't want to be fed that lie anymore. And so much of the time it is a lie. And if it's not a lie, it's exaggeration and it's spin and all the rest of it. And I don't like to moan too much, by the way. I like to comment. That's my thing. But you can't help but moan the way they carry on.
Yes, I think this book offers hope, actually, because it almost feels like you're writing it at the tail end of something really unsavory and bad that we've had to go through and we've had to survive. And that's what it feels like. It feels like an overview, a reflection on a time in our history that we'll probably look back on in 20 years' time and say, what on earth happened there? And again, we're on YouTube, got to be really, really incredibly careful about what we talk about. But things like the gender wars, as one perfect example, I can see people reflecting back on this period thinking we've all lost our minds, right? And I think that it's really important. I think a book like this is really important. Talk to us, because there are some expressions that you use that some of our viewers won't necessarily be familiar with. I am, but they might not. Talk to us about the bonfire of agreed terms.
Yeah, that was almost the essay that started off the book, and that became a chapter. But that was like an essay in itself.
Do you know what? That's interesting you say that. It felt like an opening to something. It felt like you were opening up. Yeah, that's interesting. I apologize. Go on.
Yeah, no, exactly that. And I enjoyed it so much and got such good feedback of it that I pretty much stretched that into other chapters. And that's kind of how you make a book, isn't it? So the bonfire agreed terms is a phrase I'm very proud of. But it's just like how this side has its truth and this side has its truth too. And anyone who's trained in conflict resolution or the Samaritans or whatever, which I am, is you kind of need to go to the other side to see what their idea is, what their game is, for understanding. Kier Starmer in the news right now for very obvious reasons. I now have to understand where he's coming from, having destroyed the justice system for reasons your viewers can find out later. And everything else that he's done. And is he poodle of Blair, as Hayden Appleby says? Well, you'd be a very strange person not to think so. And so, but the agreed terms we need to find is how we get the truther kind of narrative, which we like to, please tell me the truth, with his kind of globalist one, and to see where that fits, how it can understand each other, because it's not like they're about to go away. And there's lots of things with the globalists that I wouldn't want to necessarily go away. So it's trying to get the positivities out, I suppose.
It's very difficult, isn't it? I found this particularly interesting, but I think it's very difficult because, I mean, I think lots of people, including myself, we see it as almost like legacy and mainstream media and then alternative media. The problem is that both oftentimes operate on mis and disinformation, don't they? And that is part of the problem. And you're right about me, is I don't have an allegiance with any particular side. My only allegiance is with the truth. I just want to know the truth, whatever it is, even if it's something that doesn't agree, that I don't agree with. I just want to know what the truth is. And I think that that is important. And I feel that we haven't received the truth. I feel that the whole culture wars is actually anti-truth, is post-truth, Sean. And nowhere more so than in the arts, which has been absolutely decimated by these new religions. Talk to us about that, the new morality in the arts.
Yeah, I'm a member of the Freedom of the Arts organization, which is kind of new, but was brought out as a free speech device, because basically, if you don't correspond to certain identity groups, you're not going to get work, and you're not going to told that you not get told that you're not getting work, and you won't get a reason why. And the feedback that you do get when people are telling the truth with an eyebrow up is, well, you're the wrong color and the wrong sex, aren't you? And it's like, yeah, thank you, that's the truth, of what's going on. I'm a big opposer of identitarianism now. If there's, I don't take a lot of stances in life, but if there's one stance, I'm very against identity politics. I'm very happy to say no more of that. Give us the meritocracy back, please. But the best at the job. And but the arts, they're starting to say, oh no, we don't have any DEI in arts. It doesn't work because all of the companies around the world are going away from go work, go broke. None of them making any money, including Disney and all the rest of it. Watch them row it all back quite amusingly, but it's much more in depth than that, and it's going to take much more education of the young, unfortunately, who think every value that a young person might have as a massive broad sweep. There's many who aren't like this, think that their only value comes down to their identity. And it's got to be said, it doesn't matter about your race. It does matter about your sex and the fact that it's a fact, but it doesn't matter in the fact of if you're good or bad. There are no bad men and good women and bad men. These things aren't done like that. They're done like about your actual behavior and the content of your character. Martin Luther King, which everybody forgets.
Yes.
So all of us old pale male white middle-aged man and loads of women, of course, in that bracket are trying to educate people into this. There's lots of waking up going on. It's got nothing to do with Andrew Tate, though he speaks a similar language. I don't support the way he does that, just to slip that in there.
No, I don't consider him a particularly good sort of leader or hero as he's portrayed, not at all. But I do think it is interesting what we've come through. We've got an awful lot of unpacking to do, though, because this whole kind of, and woke is an unfortunate expression. It actually originated from Erykah Badu, the singer. And that was very much when I was a music journalist. And actually what she was talking about, woke was really a different thing. It was about being decent and being on the right side of things. Whereas now, obviously, we've taken it as people who don't understand, sort of the evidence of their eyes. And as I do think it is very much a post-truth era that we are in, because obviously we have newspapers that call, male she and all different things. There's so much deceit going on around us. And I object to that. I just like the plain sort of truth, just stripped back just to what it is. But I think that all of these things are important. And also some of the characters that you talk about, as for example, Julie Burchill is a perfect example. Now, she's a woman who has been heavily demonized for having an opinion. So that is the other thing, isn't it? She's done very, very successfully. She's been very successfully. And there are some people who are uncancelable, like J.K. Rowling is uncancelable. You cannot cancel that woman, no matter how much you try. So I think those things are interesting as well, that when you get to a certain level, a certain status, you then become impossible to cancel. But it's not generally the big ones that they're interested in. They're interested in kneecapping people who are like at the start of their careers, aren't they? And throwing them off and stopping them from progressing. And that, I think, is absolutely wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a risk for them, isn't it? To get those people as they're coming out is the plan. There's also another odd part where if you already have a frame which is controversial, like Julie does, love her writing to bits since the 80s. It's just so compelling to read. And I don't know her. I've interviewed her once, but I don't know her, and I actually have no desire to know my creative people. I don't need to get to know them as friends. I'm interested in their work only.
Right.
But there's not much of that because they've got to become the story, haven't they? But
yes.
If they have this controversial thing, Mick Jagger too hasn't been cancelled, though is possibly one of the most sexist people in music by all accounts, by all work. He's not cancelled. nor is to Julie, because they're already bad boys, bad
I got
friends.
you. Oh, I see.
If
Oh,
you
I
break that,
see. So if you're already established as a bad boy or a bad girl, you're okay. But if they feel that you have a career that can be taken down, they'll go for it. I absolutely loathe it. I've never met anybody who's in a better position than myself who's tried to take me down. The only people who've ever tried to take me down are in a sort of a less of a position than myself. And I think that is often the way. That is often the case. But anyway, your book, well worth it. We've got a link which we'll put in the comments. Give us a final parting shot about what inspired this.
oh well, it was started in the lockdown, and in those times which were very difficult for me, as they were for everybody else. And it's like watching what was going on, trying to gather the thoughts, and then to then I wrote the chapter Bonfire of Agreed Terms. I think as we were sort of coming out to the extent we have. And then I put the picture, which is behind me, on the front of it, which is my my real thing, is the art, and just to try to have an expression of, as you say, a post-woke, post-truth. The post-truth is unfortunate. The post-woke is good, or going towards the truth, which is what the programs we've been talking about, like yours, actually seem to stand for to me. That's why we're all watching. That's why I watch anyway. You know.
Thank you for joining us, Sean. Been a real pleasure to have you with us this morning, everybody. This is Sean Parker. Go out and get that book. Absolutely. Take good care of yourself, Sean. Have a great week. Thank you. Good to have him with us. Thank you, Sean. Right. We are rocking and rolling today. Lovely people. Yes, we are. What's this? We planted flowers in our garden just for bees. Many all over the planet have. This, honestly, listen, protect the bees. Oh, actually, it's really funny because this is my little jotter, and it is actually the funds for my little jotter, because there's Be Kind on the front of it, actually went to bee protection. There you go. Thank you, Crazy Bunny. Yes, Sean Parker, A Delicate Balance of Reason, Adventures in the Culture Wars. Indeed. And thank you for coming on, Sean, says Healing the Silence. We're going to go to our next guest. And after that, I'm going to plow in on news and observations that I've made since Friday. So let's go to our next guest, because it's that kind of morning. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Lovely to have you all with us, of course, as ever. And let's see if Matt is with us. I do believe he will be with us any second. Any second. Any second. Asked to unmute. Usual stuff. Asked to start video. How are you today out there? How are you? What have you got planned for this week? Anything exciting? Anything interesting? Here he is. Hello, Matt.
Hello, hello, hello. How are you?
Very good, thank you, everybody. This is Matt Towner. Matt, I'm not even sure how to describe you, really. You're obviously an author, but you seem so much more of an explorer as well. Would it be fair to put them on equal pegging, an author and an explorer?
Yes, definitely. I've spent my whole life traveling the world. That's always been my passion. And then I write now adventure travel stories with a sense of humor.
And don't we need a sense of humor these days, Matt? Absolutely vital. You've written Traveler's Tales, Travel Tales, your book series, and you invited alternative authors, didn't you, to essentially join you on the literary stage. How did that go?
Yeah, it's a collection of stories. My first book was self-published, which was Traveler's Tales. And then I got picked up by an international publishing house. And they then rebranded the books to A Broad Broke and Busted was the first in the series.
Love that.
And the second, Crazy Shit in Asia.
Love
and
that.
they're all a collection of stories that I put out to other friends of mine that I knew were also authors and also adventurers. And so people who travel the world and do interesting and exciting things. Some stories people end up in love, some people in jail, some people face to face with a grizzly bear, or like in Thailand.
Or some people end up with a huge US hospital bill, don't they, Matt? And I think you were $200,000. What was that for?
Well, I'm actually the biggest fan of insurance. There are people out there who travel without insurance, but I ended up having a motorcycle accident in Thailand. I fractured my skull, my spine, my ankle, my knee, my shoulder, my elbow, broke 3 ribs, perforated my lungs, and had a brain hemorrhage all in the middle of nowhere. Dirt bike accident in the jungles of Thailand. But luckily, some villagers saved my life, and I ended up in a 5-star private hospital in a coma but then 3 months in intensive care, and that bill would have been over $200,000 if I hadn't had insurance, which covered that whole bill.
You are fairly bionic at this stage, aren't you? Let me just look at how you're made up. You've got a metal spine, a metal ankle. Goodness me,
Yes.
you're suffering PTSD. You have some mild brain damage.
Yes.
But as you say, thank goodness for insurance in so many key respects. How are you managing? I mean, this hasn't taken away your desire for adventure, though, has it?
No, again, I've been lucky. I was 3 months in intensive care in Thailand. Then when they could finally get me out of there, I came back to Australia. I was 3 months. I had to literally learn how to walk and talk again. It was a whole process. That was in March 2009. So it's been a long process. It's still ongoing, but income protection insurance covers me, luckily, and allows me. I also have an Australian Arts Export grant because of what I'm doing, trying to share my stories and help other people to not make the same mistakes that others have made or that I have made. And certainly motorcycles can be dangerous, and certainly in Asia. And it's one thing that people don't really realise. You think you might have a few near misses, but you can kill yourself real easy. And thousands of people do every year.
Damn straight. I'm a bit of a wild. I was a wild child when I was young, Matt. That may not surprise you at all. But my boyfriend had a Kawasaki 650, I believe it was,
Yes.
and he let me ride it when I was 17. And it was illegal, I should point out. And he was sat on the back, and it was so ridiculous that I couldn't even, when we stopped, I couldn't even reach the ground. He had to reach the ground for me. And I remember literally going down this road and like overtaking, swerving in and out because I'm crazy like that. But the feeling of it was so exhilarating. I've always loved motorbikes. They are wonderful mode of transport in many respects, though, aren't they?
Well, and a lot of those cities and even countries, whole countries in Asia, it's the only way to get around. In Bali, for example, now you can end up in a traffic jam even on a motorcycle. So in a car, it's just almost impossible to get some places. You literally need to be able to get in and out of traffic and get around to get around.
Right, got you. Where are we speaking to you at the moment? Are you in Australia or the UK?
Yeah, I live in Byron Bay in Australia, which is a quirky little artistic, eccentric town. I've been here for 35 years. It was a sort of a hippie, surfy town when I got here, and then it became a backpacker tourist town, and now it's lifestyles of the rich and famous.
Right. Matt, tell me what happens when you come face to face with a grizzly bear? What should one do? It's not necessarily a situation I'm expecting to encounter anytime soon, but I'd just like to know, what do you do when that happens?
Yeah, well, with a lot of those animals, the worst thing that you can do is run, because they then will think that you are prey. With most animals, the biggest thing that you can do is actually be bigger than they are. So it's the same with a lot of dangerous animals. They are basically, they get more scared by someone who is
right, like
another
erratic
animal
behavior,
maybe bigger than them. So
right,
it's often the same as walking down the street in New York. If you look like someone's following you, they're generally going to mug you, and the crazier you can look, the scarier it's going to be for them to try and take you on.
That's a great tip. I was once told, actually, with hindsight, by a psychopath, but he once told me that if anybody acts mad around me, I have to act crazier. Right. So I think the same applies to a grizzly bear, basically, is what you're saying, right? Don't run under any circumstances, because then you're setting yourself up in trouble. So here's the thing that I always find with people who have traveled extensively and have an understanding about all different things, including other people's cultures and religions, etc. Talk to me about humans, Matt, and your sort of observations. And I realize this is a small question to a massive answer, but isn't it the case for the most part that people are people wherever you go?
Oh, yes, very true, but it's very poignant. I'm actually going to read you a post that I posted on my social media today. And of course, you're in the UK, so this comes from one of your elder statesmen. I no longer listen to what people say. I just watch what they do. behavior never lies. Winston Churchill. And I think that says a lot about people. And that's certainly, I've always been a watcher, an admirer, and an investigator of people and of places. And I think that's an important thing, especially when you're traveling. You do have to be very careful of people. You can't always trust everybody, and it is important to watch their behavior. Don't necessarily listen to what they're saying, because there are a lot of con men and con women out there.
I mean, that is the reality, isn't it? Do you think that there are parts of the world, I mean, obviously there will be that don't necessarily have the same kind of accesses to the internet that we do. But aside from that, but do you think that there are countries or places that are more awake to what is happening, the big picture, than others?
Oh, yes, certainly. And perhaps some that are even avoiding it better than others.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, I often get to a point where I'm ready to get rid of all technology and go and live on a tropical island.
Oh.
I joke, if I go missing, I'll just be in a little bar on the beach with a thatched roof, just me and Tom Cruise flipping cocktails, if you remember that movie. That's sort of my fantasy, to just run away from all the stress of the world and the way it's all going, and just be on a tropical island and have a nice little bungalow and a beach bar. So in some ways, that's hiding from the world, but the way the world's going, it's getting crazier and crazier. What better place to hide?
I couldn't agree with you more. Now, obviously, the aim is to take what you do and turn it into a TV series, right? And for that, you're going to be able to call on all manner of different people, aren't you? I see doctors and lawyers, politicians, activists from all over the world. Now, that obviously, be careful, YouTube rules. I don't know if you know about the community rules on here, but absolutely insane. We're talking proper totalitarianism in terms of some subjects. So we have to be careful. But I think that is a really wonderful idea. So the premise of that show would be these people, their travel tales.
Yeah, so basically I'm now taking the book series, and I've just been to the London Book Fair. I've just been to Los Angeles, and I'm pitching the same idea that I did with the book series, in terms of a whole series of short stories by various different authors, all very different, men, women, some all different countries, all different genders, religions, and getting different philosophies and stories, and then taking that to a podcast series, and then to a television series, which would be across somewhere between Banged Up Abroad, which was a UK series, and Black Mirror, which is so it's got a little bit of everything.
What a combination, though. I mean, that's a huge combination.
Right.
What have you learned? I mean, do you think that you've changed as a consequence of your travels, or have you remained essentially the same?
Oh, no, I always say I learned more in my first year of travel than I did in 3 years of university. Wow. And I think everybody should travel. And certainly one country, I would think everyone should go to India at least once in their life. It has changed a lot since I first was going there and even living there 30 years ago. But the beauty of some of those countries where you see obscene poverty, Africa I've just been to for the first time, it's the same. There are people with absolutely nothing, but the biggest smiles on their faces. Where you go to a city like London, New York, Sydney, and there are people with everything, and they're so distressed and depressed.
Right.
It's very interesting.
It is interesting, but maybe we're so stressed when you say we have everything, because the quality of our life in order to get those everythings is actually reduced and diminished, right? It's on the hamster wheel, isn't it? The thing is,
exactly.
I do a job that I enjoy doing, and I don't necessarily feel I'm at work. And that has always been my philosophy. I want to always, thank you so much, universe, for blessing me with that, because it is my philosophy that I don't want to feel like I'm working. I want it to feel like a passion, and it feels like a passion. And I get that impression from you as well.
Totally. Well, I've never been someone to be able to go on a holiday and just lie by the pool and read a book.
Right.
And good luck to people who can do that. Every time I travel, and I travel a lot, but any excuse I need a mission, whether that's, I've always done a lot of property investing in my professional career. So, I've been involved in helping to build little resorts in Indonesia or in Thailand, in Australia. And then through my book series, In fact, in my 20s, I took Australian opals all over the world. In my 30s, I took Australian wine. In my 40s, Australian real estate. And now in my 50s, I'm taking Australian authors with me on this ride all over the world that we're now taking to podcast and to television. And certainly open to anyone out there who does want to find me on social media as we reconnect with a whole new website and a whole new plan for this whole series.
I agree with you. Let's read some of these comments. They're loving you in the chat. Synchronized Soul says, yes, travel if you can. Marie said, even my tutor at uni said travel is the best education. Loving this guy. And Healing the Science said, same Zoe, I could listen to Matt all day and still want more. How lovely. How absolutely lovely. So you've already got a viewership going on in our comments there, Matt. Where would you recommend?
Well, thank you all.
But not at all. Thank you for joining us. Where would you recommend people visit as a must-do place to go on your bucket list?
Oh, well, one of my favorite places in the world, and I'm a tropical island guy. I've been snow skiing 3 times in my life, and it still doesn't do enough for me for the cold to be exciting. I still do have to do the Northern Lights, but I think I'll be flying in, staying in one of those glass igloos to see that extravaganza and then flying the hell out of there again before I get frostbite. But I love tropical islands, and the island of Copenhagen in Thailand is one of my favorites. I've been going there since 1991 when a crew of us eccentric travelers and adventurers started the full moon parties there. Like everywhere, here in Byron Bay as well, these sort of artistic, creative places like Ibiza, like Sedona, they then become gentrified. The artists found them, and then the money comes and they terracotta the town and paint it all white and make it all too expensive, and then wonder why it loses its creative edge. But Copenhagen is changing very quickly, but it's still a beautiful island, and I love it because eccentricity isn't just accepted there, it's actually encouraged.
Oh, we love that.
Eccentric island.
We love that. Let's all embrace some of our own eccentricity, everybody. I think that's a great parting shot from Matt. Matt, thank you so much for joining us today. Everybody, this is Matt Towner. We've got a link, I think, to some of his books in our comments, and we will make sure that that is also in the description. Thank you so much, Matt. Take good care of yourself. Have a brilliant week, everybody. Matt Towner. Thank you. Bye. Got us all ready to go on holiday now. Take care. Wonderful. Look at those balloons. We love them. We love them. Take care, Matt. Bye. Bye.
See you later.
Bye. Bye. Brilliant. Brilliant. Absolutely wonderful. I feel like a holiday. Do you feel like a holiday, people? I feel like a holiday. Right. I would imagine that James from, I don't know where you're from, James, but James would feel like a holiday. James sent me an email. I'm going to read some of it. Some of it I'm going to have to do a sort of blankety blank because of the problems with YouTube. Right. He said, hi, Sonia. Hope you are well. I came across this rather strange event, which I thought you may be interested in covering. Oh, he's absolutely right. But I'm not sure how much I can cover on here. But anyway, he said it's a new age festival hosting a C for F's, I can't even say these words, and D's for Dykes workshop at a family-friendly festival. I think you're getting an idea. He said, in case the link needs translating into standard English, it concerns a straight woman claiming to be a gay man, teaching gay people how to have relations with the opposite sex. That's really confusing. Now, all of that is just kind of like, not my thing. I don't approve of it. I don't like it. But where I don't like, and James realizes this, is that it involves children. Yes, there is indeed at this festival a children and young people's space. Right. And guess what? That will include, I'm sure I don't need to surprise you. By the way, this is in Devon in August. It actually starts on my birthday, August 15th to August 19th. And this children and young people's space will include drag queen story time. You're shocked, aren't you? I know you're shocked. But the point is that I would like you to actually find this online because there's so many words I literally cannot use on this stream, but it is actually obscene. And the idea of involving children in such a festival is abhorrent. The facilitator is somebody called Tessa Wills. And Tessa, I was just going to say, I dare you to come on the stream and explain it, but actually we'd have to blank almost every word that Tessa uses because this festival just sounds like an absolute shower. It's disgusting. I'm disgusted by it. And you're absolutely right, James. And actually, away from YouTube, I will be raising quite a lot of awareness and attention about keeping your children away from adult festivals. Do not take children to adult festivals, right? They don't need to be thrown in at that. And in fact, actually, it's a form of child abuse, non-contact child abuse, to expose children to this sort of goings on. So thank you for alerting me to that, James. John wrote in, do you remember he got us all going the other week when he raised the issue of local councils turning off street lights at night when they're supposed to be on? Well, John is not happy. We're not surprised, and neither are we. He said, hi again, Sonia. Thank you for covering this topic on one of your recent live streams. And the outrage of the commentators definitely validated my feelings on what is being called the big switch off. I'm not sure if you had a chance to investigate into it yet with all the important topics you cover, but wanted to draw your attention to articles running on the BBC, Coventry Telegraph, and Coventry Live, and likely other sources. And John goes on to explain that Coventry City are claiming that the lights need to go off in order to save £700,000 per year, due mainly to sort of central government cuts. However, as John points out, and I think this is really important, he said, however, an ongoing project that is already unpopular with Coventry residents has had a reported overspend of £900,000. They're turning the old IKEA building into a cultural centre that nobody needs or wants. Well, we all know what they mean by cultural centres these days, as Sean Parker was clearly outlining. And John said, I've linked the BBC article whilst pinching my nose, but it does cover the overspending issue, quite honestly, from what I can see. I'm sure you'll agree this is an absolute farce and the council is treating us with contempt at this point. A petition is about to go live, set up by another Coventry resident. So hopefully people power will prevail. It's just so ridiculous. What is the point of street lights if they're not going to be turned on at night? That's when they're supposed to be on. I don't know about you, but when I'm driving down a motorway, as one example, I hate it at night when there's miles and miles of dark road on a motorway. I think that is absolutely remiss when people are zooming down motorways and there isn't any street lighting for miles. And I object. I absolutely object. Any of you noticed any shutting off of street lights? Yeah, but Pink Diamond, I hear you. Pink Diamond says she doesn't have a problem against the idea of children being around drag because I used to love pantomimes. It's a completely different form of drag. Have you seen? I made a video called Drag Queen Storytime, Child Grooming in Plain Sight. And I actually show you the comparison that people often make between, you know, Widow Twankey as one example, who we've all grown up with, or many of us have, and like the Danny LaRue's. The whole drag queen now is a completely different thing. It's basically like the sort of bolshy younger brother who's come in, and some of the names of these drag queens, and they're being put in front of children. The names are almost always highly sexual. The behavior is highly sexual. In Drag Queen Storytime, I actually show you a series of cases in the US where these drag queens were abusers and they were just using their position to get close to children. But I take your point. I take your point. Shug says, I also believe the Bible is a collection of warnings from the future times. It's all cyclical, isn't it? I think it is. I think it says more about individual parents than celebrities who have a right to freedom of expression. Lyra says they use adult entertainers for drag queens these days, not the family-friendly ones. Yes, absolutely. And Julie compares drag queens to Pied Pipers. And I hear that loud and clear. But I take your point, Pink Diamond. Pink Diamond, in the time that she's been commenting on here, strikes me as a very fair individual. But I would urge you to check out my documentary because I really sort of cover it there. Right, I want to do my own observations of what's taken place in the UK election since Friday, really, since Thursday, the general election, and Friday, obviously, the announcement. So one of the most controversial appointments, which we touched on briefly with Hayden, is Sir Patrick Vallance, Minister of State of Science. So Sir Patrick, who is not an elected MP, you may be surprised to hear, was appointed to Science Minister. And in order for them to be able to do that, you know what they had to do, right? Well, they had to give him a peerage in the same way as they brought back former Prime Minister David Cameron from the political wilderness, put him in the House of Lords, gave him a peerage, and then made him Foreign Minister. So they do this. This is something they do. Or Foreign Secretary, rather. He was made Foreign Secretary. But the thing is, they've brought back Patrick Vallance because he's a big proponent of green energy. Yes, he is. Right? Huge proponent of it. And there are many issues around Patrick Vallance. Oh, Vallance, isn't it? Please forgive me. My weakness is name pronunciation. It is, because I see things phonetically. The same names go round in cycles. Absolutely. Oh, MK Ultra, my 85-year-old father said Kier is going to cause a civil uprising. Absolutely. Yes, Crazy Bunny. She is a great chat contributor, old Pink Diamond. Yes, she is. So Patrick Vallance is so basically what he's been rewarded for his stance. But let me talk to you a little bit about him and a bit about his history. He obviously became a household name during C19. He frequently appeared at the parliamentary podium for the press conferences. His announcements were absolute fear porn, and he became known as Dr. Doom. He quit his role in 2022, and now, of course, he's set to make this interesting return to Whitehall as Minister of State of Science. He is, as I say, been a big advocate for Labour's green policies, having voiced support for the party's ambition to decarbonise Britain's electricity supplies by, guess when? There's that year again, by 2030. He was heavily involved with the climate conference COP26, which is the so-called climate negotiations, when they all came in on their private planes. He also leads the Net Zero Innovation Board, which provides strategic oversight of government funding of net zero innovation programs. So it's a grift then. It's a grift, right? There have been many questions about the potential conflicts of interest to do with Patrick Vallance and whether this impacted his C19 advice, given his long-term role as the president of research and development at, wait for it, big pharma company GlaxoSmithKline. Excuse me there. After 6 years at GlaxoSmithKline, his base salary as executive director was a phenomenal £780,000 a year. When he left, he cashed in 5 million worth of shares that he got from them for his time working for them. And in 2017, that was when he took up the role of government chief scientific advisor. The International Weekly at the International Weekly Science Journal, and it said his salary was up to £180,000 a year, which was actually more than the Prime Minister. This is great work if you can get it right. And let us be clear, the ex-big pharma chief was the spearhead behind the government's C19 lockdown and jab program, certainly the jab program. It was under his leadership of SAGE, which was the government's scientific advisory group for emergencies that pushed extremely hard lockdowns. Prior to this, he was in the media talking about building herd immunity by letting, and I'm quoting him, enough of us who are going to get mild illness to become immune, right? And he notoriously supported and presented extreme and over-the-top forecasts for C19, and he further reinforced and pushed lockdowns and jabs. Yes, he did. This is the reality. In September 2020, the Telegraph revealed that he had, as I say, £600,000 worth of shares in GlaxoSmithKline. So this is he's now a Knight Commander of the Order of the Bath and has secured this phenomenal, powerful position within the government. And so, yes, he's part of the net zero green agenda. And you know, some people are questioning, is he really a sort of a man of science, or is he just part of an agenda that serves him very, very nicely? I think I know the answer to that one. Yeah, so that is Patrick Vallance, or Vallance. God, please forgive me. And the other thing that I noticed that irritated me. Now, you may or may not be familiar with Paul Brand. Paul Brand is he is the ITV no, the UK editor for ITV News. ITV News is obviously one of the main terrestrial TV channels that we have in the UK. So he's the UK news editor. And he tweeted about Angela Rayner. And Angela Rayner has been confirmed as Deputy Prime Minister. No shock there at all. And what he tweeted really showed like such a level of classism to me, coming from the similar background to Angela Rayner. He said, from leaving school, pregnant at 16 with no qualifications, a grandmother at 40, to second most powerful person in Britain. Well, first of all, Angela Rayner is not the second most powerful person in Britain. None of the politicians are the most powerful people in Britain. No, not at all. It is the invisible hands that are the most powerful people, the people who these politicians are sort of compromised to in some respects, whether they're on boards or whether they're mates or whether these companies have financed their offices or their campaigns. These are the most powerful people in Britain, not Angela Rayner, not Kier Starmer, not Rishi Sunak. None of them, absolutely not. And Paul Brand, incidentally, is an uber woke journalist, the type I literally cannot stand. He's a big supporter of the gender agenda, a patron of a group that promotes such diversity into schools, including primary schools, and a man who, together with his husband, brought in a surrogate to deliver unto them a baby. No, I don't approve. No, I don't approve. Some people don't like my language when it comes to surrogacy. Well, I don't like the practice. It's wrong to take a baby away from their natural mother to give a baby to two people who perhaps can't produce such a thing between them. And I don't care how un-PC that statement is. Don't like my language? I don't like surrogacy. So there you go. Right? And by the way, newspapers have said the quiet bit out loud this weekend. I noted in the Daily Telegraph with a picture of George Galloway, it said, "Goodbye, Galloway. This was a triumph for Israel. Britain has breathed a sigh of relief." Wait a second. So in the UK general election, the losing of Galloway's party, of Workers' Party of Britain, is a triumph for Israel. We always knew it, didn't we? We always knew it. Yes, it is indeed. Yes, it is. And talking about George Galloway's party, the Workers' Party of Britain, it was interesting what Jess Philips had to say. Jess Philips, of course, is Labour MP in Birmingham. She made claims of intimidation about other candidates from George Galloway's party, the Workers' Party of Britain. And we could hear them shouting and booing when their candidate was narrowly beaten by Philips at the general election. Now, I've disagreed with Jess about a multitude of things, but she's the best MP that Birmingham Yardley has had in decades, and the people know it, and that's why she got back in again. She was in conversation with presenter Lewis Goodall on LBC yesterday. Now, Lewis is a proper establishment hack, just like Paul Brand. And the conversation with Philips was about how this was a new development in elections, and both of them pointed at the internet and as the reason why. They said that content drivers are making these videos that are driving people to behave a certain way in real life. This scared me. This scared me. Hello, Sam likes fruit. You say it, Sonia. Love it. I'll do my best. This scared me when they turned their attentions to the internet and the influence of the internet into these developments of intimidation in general elections. And you know why? Watch out for this to be used as the next step in internet censorship. Bear in mind, we were originally given the internet as a place where we could basically share anything. Anybody remember those halcyon days at the beginning? The stuff I watched on YouTube in the early days was mind-blowing, amazingly eye-opening. Not anymore. Can't find any of that stuff. A lot of it I did manage to download. There was loads of brilliant stuff that you used to be able to find online, which of course now has been censored because everything is sanitized and approved for the public gaze. And so, no, I just think that's really interesting. We know that the powers that be do not like us to have any form of free reign on the internet. And you know why? You only have to look down at my comments on this live stream, right? And I think it's really interesting because we have become a powerful force. People on the internet have become a powerful force. And obviously the powers that be don't want us to be a powerful force. They want us to go back to how we were. And that is being told what to think by their mates in legacy media, right? So, yeah, Yeah, what was that comment about? Oh, Lyra says, totally agree about Raina. The nasty looking down on her due to her class position. The middle class intelligentsia can't help sneering. They literally can't. And because I do come from a similar background, I just like, they reek of it to me. They absolutely reek of it to me. Yeah, Red Scotland. I remember they told us the internet would be free when they tried to roll it out. That lasted well. I know. I'm not sure what that relates to. I mean, Lyra, I think that is literally it. They don't want us to think critically because we'll upend their agenda. Absolutely. And by the way, somebody made a comment to me over the weekend, said people are prisoners of their phones. Is that why they are called cell phones? I was like, whoa, whoa, that's mind-blowing. I hadn't even considered that before. I'm sure you wonderful people out there have considered it. And guess what happened during the UK general elections? I kind of referenced this a little bit earlier. Well, HMRC, right, withheld offshore tax avoidance figures for UK's wealthy. That's what. Oh, yes, they did. There has been increased pressure to estimate offshore tax avoidance, almost 40 billion of uncollected revenues from some of the wealthiest people around. And this has been going on for a long time. In June 2022, Lucy Fraser, who was then the Financial Secretary of the Treasury, she pledged that HMRC, which is His Majesty's Revenue and Customs, would publish figures on the offshore tax gap. But guess what? The release of those figures has been repeatedly delayed, and it was supposed to come out at the beginning of July, and then the election arrived, right? And here's the thing, is that an HMRC report, which was published on the 20th of June this year, just weeks after the election was called, estimated that the tax gap to be 39.8 billion for 1 year alone, 2022 to 2023. The tax gap, if you don't know, is the difference between the amount of tax that should be collected and what has actually been paid. Think about that. If they're estimating 39 billion for 1 year alone, it's probably 80. It's probably at least double that. Who knows? But imagine even if it was only 40 billion. They are not collecting 40 billion from the richest amongst us. Imagine what that could do to our infrastructure. Imagine what it could do for our education, our National Health Service, right? It's really hard for people to get National Health Service dentists. Imagine plowing 1 billion into dentists. And this has been going on for an awful long time, and they delayed it. And I find that interesting. Have you ever considered making a song out of comments online? That's a good question, asking Shin. Wealth tax needs to be implemented, says Healing the Silence. And you know, that's probably not really going to happen, right? You know that, right? I know what I want to talk about. This, I think, is really important. And it's a subject that has long interested me, as you can imagine. And that is 7-7. What does 7-7 mean to you? Wonderful people. What does it mean to you? 7-7. Let me have a look in the comments. Let's find out what you're saying about 7-7. Anything? Oh, Catherine says, please don't get me started on health services. Yet see how we are living, says, and yes, it goes to Ukraine and Israel. Right. Yes. Vallance, like a piece of bed covering. That's him. Now that's better, Tara, because now I will remember how to pronounce his name. There you go. Red Scotland, 7-7, false flag event. Cat, London bombing. Shin, Liverpool Street. Mike, bombs. Hepplewin, London bombs. Yes, so you know, right? So you all know. So basically, yesterday was the 19th anniversary since 7-7, so abbreviated as it followed 9/11 and the controlled demolitions on the World Trade Center and subsequent buildings. The 7th of July, 2005 London bombings, also referred to as 7-7, as I say, were a series of 4 coordinated suicide attacks, which we were told were carried out by Islamist terrorists that targeted commuters travelling on London's public transport during the morning rush hour. And I actually remember that morning so clearly. I was actually chasing a bill owed to me by the Daily Mirror, and I was talking to the accounts department, and the guy said, we've just been bombed. And I'm like, what? You've just been bombed? He's like, no, London's just been bombed. And I remember, I literally get shivers even thinking about that conversation. Awful, horrendous stuff. There were a series of detonations that took place over London. There was a double-decker bus in Tavistock Square. There were 3 train bombings on the Circle Line near Aldgate and at Edgware Road, and on the Piccadilly Line near Russell Square. Apart from the bombers, 52 UK residents of 18 different nationalities were killed. More than 700 were injured in the attacks. It was the UK's deadliest terrorist incident since the 1988 bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 near Lockerbie. And of course, all of these major events are all subject to big questions. And one of the big questions, and this is no disrespect to the victims, because here's the thing, here's what's disrespectful to the victims, is when you lie, when you don't tell the truth about what's really been going on, right? Now, many people have had lots of problems with the 7/7 narrative for an awful long time. And there's good reasons why, because some of it simply doesn't make sense. So the explosions were caused by improvised explosive devices. Some people said it's not possible to be able to blow the roof off of a bus with a homemade device. That's a lie. Yes, it is, because I've seen an experiment where it's possible. It is possible. One of the things that I think is a really serious problem is in a city which is in the top 10 around the world of the most CCTV. There's hardly any CCTV of these guys, right? The last CCTV image we see of the 4 bombers is at King's Cross Underground, and that's it. I saw a documentary with Brian Paddock, who was the Deputy Police Commissioner of the Met at the time. There were a group of skeptics about 7/7. They were asking him about this, and his reasons were it could have been a simple issue with CCTV errors. What, on all the networks that London Underground covers? On the bus network, the bus CCTV didn't work. The tube CCTV was down for 20 minutes that morning. That's interesting. I find that interesting. Oh, Rock Lover, that is absolutely right. You're talking about the ripple, I think it's the ripple effect, which I'll get to. Absolutely made the documentary. So Brian Paddock attempted to explain all that. And what he said, honestly, it didn't make any sense at all. He said the systems weren't recording properly. The camera was out. The system was full and didn't want to record anymore. Honestly, it sounded pathetic. It really did. Paddock said that there was other evidence to place these men at the scenes of their crimes, including DNA and identity documents. Where have we heard that from before? Oh, I know. The bombers, or the hijackers rather, of 9/11, they conveniently managed to make their passports fall to the ground when they were hijacking the planes. Do you remember that? So I think the same thing also happened with 7/7. So Channel 4 did a debunking documentary. I think it was in 2021. And they were the ones who were talking to Brian Paddock. And it was so interesting because there were various people. So they interviewed this one woman who claimed to have seen one of the bombers, Siddiqui Khan, at Edgware Road. She said she walked past him and he must have thought, this is what the woman said, the witness said, he must have thought, today is your last day looking at me. Then she claimed that she knew someone who had seen him reach down and detonate the bomb. But that's one person saying that, right? And there are lots of other things that are astonishingly do not make sense at all. Because the other thing that was really odd was there was a parallel training exercise taking place that day. Where have we heard that before? A mock exercise when a major event takes place, right? So there was a mock exercise taking place on 7/7 in London and using, believe it or not, the same tube stations as the bombers. Let me run that past you again. There was a mock exercise taking place in London to prepare in the event of a terrorist attack, and they were using the same tube stations as the bombers. What? What? Please. I found that an astonishing coincidence. Peter Power, who was the man who was running the training session, said on TV, actually later that day on 7/7, in all my times of running training sessions for Scotland Yard, it never happened to me that the real thing happened. But suddenly at about 9:30 this morning, the scenario of simultaneous bomb attacks in central London, the crisis team was there for a few moments. I thought, is this part of the scenario? Have I managed to pull something off that they pay me lots of money for, something? And all of a sudden, we decided to stop the exercise and go into real time. I shiver to watch him say that. It's very weird. He refuses to give interviews these days. He says he's been misquoted, but it's a TV recording, right? And he also says that people have, sort of nefarious ideas about what took place. But I just think that's weird, right? What are the chances? I mean, this is a whole stack of serious events like this, where training exercises in the event of serious events like this were actually taking place at the same time. The other thing that was astonishing was at the inquest, it was revealed that the security services had been trailing Siddiqui Khan, one of the 4 men, since 2000. They knew he had been to Pakistan, to various training camps. How could MI5 follow him for so long and not know that this was going to happen? So the question is, did they allow it to happen? Did they? Or were these men really patsies? Because there are other stories that these men were not there at all. There are also other stories that these men believed that they were part of a training exercise, and they boarded their train together. 3 of them came from Leeds, Beeston in Leeds. 1 came from Luton, Jermaine Lindsay, a recent convert to Islam at the time. They all met at Luton. They boarded the train. But here's the other thing. The government got the train time wrong. They said originally that the 4 suicide bombers had caught the 9:40 from Luton. Guess what? Turned out there wasn't a 9:40 from Luton on that day. It had been cancelled. So the likelihood is that they actually caught the 9:25. But this is quite a significant thing to get wrong. We've seen CCTV footage of them. I think it might be at Aylesbury Station, but it's coming from Luton. Hey, guess who was in power at the time? Remember? The devil himself, Tony Blair, who's come back around again because, old devils don't die. They just resurface. And the fact is, many people believe that what took place on 7/7 was actually a false flag attack. That's what many people believe. They believe it is justification to continue wars in the Middle East and to continue wars in general. I knew all the locations and that happened, where the bombing happened in London. I'd lived for years in Edgware Road. Used to take that station for my first newspaper job, actually. And there were many problems with the story, but there is an alternative story that our wonderful commentators have made a comment about. The ripple effect. 57-minute homemade film about the bombing, produced and narrated by John Hill, which is his real name. But yes, I'm not sure who mentioned this. Scapegoats, says Kat. And what's interesting is the film, I highly recommend it. The film poses numerous questions about the events surrounding the attacks, and it presents credible alternative theories for who was behind them. The film absolutely implicates the Metropolitan Police and Tony Blair, and claims that the true perpetrators of the attacks were MI5 and/or Mossad, obviously Israel's secret services. There is a belief in the film that these 4 men were tricked into traveling to London with rucksacks in order to provide CCTV footage later to be used as evidence in the investigation of the attacks. Interesting film, very interesting film. The film was first released on the internet on 5th of November 2007, 2 years after the attacks. Physical copies were also sent to many of the people connected with the attacks. Hill was arrested and extradited to the United Kingdom on a charge of perverting the course of justice and for sending DVDs of the film to the judge and jury foreman in a trial linked to the attacks. And he was acquitted on the 12th of May 2011. Sally Ann said it's all done to bring in more restrictions, and we have to be realistic. We are run by psychopaths who have no problems in lying and killing and kidnapping and imprisoning and blaming and scapegoating. These are the realities. The film is called The Ripple Effect, I believe. Hold on, let me second. 7/7 Ripple Effect. Yeah. Yes, that's right. It was under the pseudonym Muad'Dib, the name of the character from the Dune books. That's right. And beyond belief, that's a great quote, isn't it? Our purpose was to document the event. And it did lead to the murder of Jean-Charles de Menes. Yes, it did. And interestingly, the senior cop who instructed for Menes to be taken down on the tube then became the most senior cop of the Metropolitan Police, and in fact the most senior cop in England and Wales. Right. Christine says, true, Sonia, psychopath, corrupt criminal. Yeah. Simon says, watching 7/7 Ripple Effect was what woke me up. Right. Got it. Yes, please hit the like button, lovely people, as one of the glorious mods says. It does help. Fahrenheit 9/11 as well, KB says. Yeah, this is all interesting. 2012, The Future of Mankind is the only lecture you need to listen to if you have the ears and want to comprehend today's predicament that we find ourselves in, says Shug. Yes. D Hall says, missing CCTV Verint Systems, an Israeli technology company which provides technology relevant to the war on terror. I hear you, AK Very. It was also about seeding social division and hatred between religious communities. Something happening big time now. Absolutely. Oh, Ripple Effect 2, Rock Lover points out, is the later version. Got you. Thank you, Rock Lover. Appreciate that very much. And you're right. Problem, reaction, solution. So there's problems, obviously, with the official narrative. And again, just to be clear, this is never, ever disrespect to the victims, alive and dead, right? Never, ever disrespect. Just imagine if those 4 men were actually patsies. Imagine if they were actually innocent and they were set up by the state and they've been demonized. You know what happens when people get demonized? And I saw people yesterday and they were like, this is, they're basically repeating the absolute official narrative, but the official narrative is holy. And I don't mean holy as in religious. I mean full of holes. Yes, it is. Let's be real about it. But controlled demolition, building 7. I mean, that is the thing, right? Let me just say about this. I think this is interesting, right? Is that obviously the BBC have always maintained this narrative through and through. But the BBC were also the same people who told us that Building 7 had collapsed when the reporter was stood in front of Building 7 still standing. Right, it then collapsed. And I actually did an article for the Daily Express. And it was somebody who was being taken to court for non-payment of their TV license. And they argued that they were not going to pay the TV license because the money was going to BBC, and BBC had lied about 9/11. And guess what? People won. They won. On front page of the Daily Express, people actually, it was Sunday Express at the time. But yes. And Richard Goodwin, see, that's interesting. The introduction of the Canary Wharf, right? A police radio message said they had been shot at Canary Wharf. There are many people and eyewitnesses who claim these 4 men were at Canary Wharf, right? So it's interesting. I just find it curious that in a city like London, where we have CCTVs coming out of our anus, well, not me personally, but you get my point. How can all the CCTV have gone down for 20 minutes during that attack, right? How can it, including on buses? Some people say also because the bus had to reroute and then it ended up outside the British Medical Association. So that is curious to some people as well, because what are the chances of a bus that has been blown up then ending up outside an organisation that is full of medics? Interesting, right? Interesting. Shin, most people still don't want to know about Building 7. Where do we start? We start little, Shin. We start little and keep people with us. That's what we do. That's true, Tara. There was a mock exercise in Boston the day before the Boston Marathon bombing. Yes, that's right. Greg remembers a TV bulletin saying the suspects have been shot at Canary Wharf on the day. Yes, the conspirators do have access. What's this beyond belief? Social Security Death Index doesn't record 3K deaths in New York that day. That's interesting. Heppel win or CCTV down during Diana's last journey. If they credit them with such a feat, that's, yeah. Richard D. Hall played a large part in waking me up, says Kat. He just offered an alternative view to what I thought I knew. Yeah, and Richard does come with his facts and stats. I don't always agree with his conclusions, but I think that some of his conclusions are very interesting. And he is a very well-researched individual. And onto our geoengineering spot. And you know why we have it? Because legacy media won't, right? Dave T wrote in, hi, Sonia, you were asking for some data on chemtrails on your last 2 or 3 shows. I have a friend who logs all CT activity in our area, specifically over our town, Darlington, in County Durham. He's given me the name. I'm going to be looking him up. He has a terabyte of videos and flight radar data stored on his HDDs. Here is a link to his YouTube channel. His name is Andy Pilkington. I'll put a link in the description. And I don't know if I mentioned Gail from Romford in Essex on Friday, but she sent me some images that literally look as if someone has been painting white emulsion in the skies. She took some in April and noted the times of line visibility. And she further took pictures the day before she wrote to me last week. She said the pictures were taken yesterday at between 7:37 and 15:38, and the lines visible between 8:27 and 8:30 are still hanging in the sky at 15:38. I love that kind of precision, Gail. Gail wrote, not normal, very worrying, and today's sky is a blanket of cloud. Right? Absolutely. And thank you to Helen on X. Helen tags me in to people's geoengineering images, and Concerned Citizen on X, good morning to you. Unbelievably clear example of geoengineered sky. Not long until they come out and tell us it's for the greater good. Only a matter of time, people. Only a matter of time. Yes, we are coming close to the end of our show, but I've got to talk about one thing. Selfitis. Are you familiar with selfitis? I had to have a drink before I talk about this. Thing about me is that I get irritated by people who post too many selfies. I do. I don't know whether that's good or bad, but I do, especially adults. On a gut instinct, I know that there is something like wrong at the core of people who just constantly post selfies. And if they are children and posting too many selfies, what is wrong with them? What's wrong with them is they have rotten parents, so I can't blame them. But if they are adults, actual adults, constantly posting streams of selfies, I think there's something wrong with them. So I decided to look into it. Right? I decided to look into it. And it's interesting because I was looking about how a story had appeared like 10 years ago that claimed that the American Psychiatric Association, the APA, had classed it as selfitis, and they said it was a new mental disorder. And according to the author, the organization had defined selfitis as the obsessive compulsive desire to take photos of oneself and post them on social media as a way to make up for the lack of self-esteem and to fill a gap in intimacy. Now, it turned out, actually, that story was a hoax. The APA had not done that report, and it was a hoax. But here's the thing. It was reproduced all around the world because it resonated with people. People believed that those who post too many selfies have a mental disorder. People believe that, but that was a hoax. So what happened was the publication Psychology Today, which looks at psychological phenomenon, thought it would be interesting to examine whether there was actually any real substance to the claims that people who post a lot of selfies have a mental disorder. And so they actually empirically, scientifically, explored the concept of selfitis. Across 2 studies, they collected data on the existence of selfitis with respect to 3 alleged levels. These were borderline, acute, and chronic. And they developed a psychometric scale to assess the sort of subcomponents of selfitis. They called it the selfitis behavior scale. And it's really interesting. Their study began with a focus group where they interviewed 225 young adults with an average age of 21, which is often around about the age that people are posting multiple selfies. It's very disconcerting when you see adults posting multiple selfies, because that's when you have to wonder what is actually wrong with them. But it's really curious. So they realized that there were 6 components to those who take lots of selfies. And so here they are. Environmental enhancement. This is taking selfies in specific locations to feel good and to show off to others. We know those people. Then there is social competition, taking selfies to get more likes on social media. We know those people as well. Then there is the attention seeking, taking selfies to gain attention from others. There's mood modification, which is taking selfies to feel better about yourself. And then there is self-confidence, taking selfies to feel more positive about oneself. And then finally, excuse me, there is subjective conformity, taking selfies to fit in with one's social group and peers. And their findings were interested, showed that those with chronic selfitis were more likely to be motivated to take selfies due to attention seeking, environmental enhancement, and social competition. And I would concur with those results, actually. But what they said was, at this stage, they weren't outright saying that selfitis was a mental disorder. We've got quite a long way to go in terms of long-term studies, the impact of the internet on human psychology as one example. But nonetheless, from a sort of COD psychology standpoint, I am absolutely turned off by people who post a lot of selfies. I always think there's something wrong with them. Yeah, I do. I'm not talking about occasionally posting selfies or, about an achievement or being on holiday, just occasionally. But if it's like a constant day in, day out, multiple selfies, there's something wrong with you. You might need help. It might point to the fact that you have serious insecurity issues. And I'm not attacking you. I'm just saying, look at your behavior and it may help you to progress in an altogether more positive way. So as I say, they're not able at this stage to say whether selfitis is a mental disorder. But in terms of my household, yeah, the jury is not still out on this one. I do consider it. I do consider that there is some sort of psychological problem. Craig's laughing at me. You know I'm like, Craig. You know what I'm like. So that is selfitis. And also, did you know, by the way, that there isn't a McDonald's in Iceland? I found out this weekend. And the reason I say that is because McDonald's is everywhere. They're absolutely everywhere. There was once a McDonald's restaurant in Reykjavik in 1993. And that's it. There was a problem with the crashing of the markets. They said that it caused the menu items to skyrocket to 20% more than usual. And Iceland actually had the highest price Big Mac in the whole world on the day that they were closing, right? The restaurant closed down, as they say, due to the financial crash. But what was interesting was on the last day that they were open, which was actually 2009, Icelanders crowded the restaurant for the last time, and more than 10,000 burgers were sold that day. You're shocked, aren't you? I just find it great that McDonald's isn't there. Kat, yes, they have done the research. They have the answers. Is that about McDonald's or about selfitis? Mrs. Pirate, yes, they do. They need to do a study on people who post the current thing. For example, I've had my C jab, Ukraine, etc. Virtue signaling itis. I love that. St. George's Sue saying about the street lighting. I'm in Hampshire and we've had our street lights off between 1 to 4 a.m. for a couple of years now. That's wrong. HK, very interesting question. What about people like me who never post any selfies? I have an active dislike of it, despite having traveled to amazing places. Thank you, Dee. Dee loves the show. Thank you. We're coming to an end now. Wonderful, glorious, beautiful people. And one of the things that struck me was that the sort of bedrock of my life is I'm not great on conformity and I'm not great on routine. But what I have come to really appreciate over the last few years is actually the importance of developing a daily routine. Now, routines can literally be like an anchor to your life, create incredible stability. And so no matter what's going on in our day, we know that certain things take place. So, for example, I know that in the mornings, if I'm around, I'll walk the dog. And in the evenings, I'll walk the dog. I know roughly what time our meal times are, and I know roughly what time I go to bed these days. And those things create security and support in my life. I came from what would have commonly be termed a dysfunctional background as a childhood. I was this kid who, and no disrespect to my family, wonderful family, we were hippies basically though, but I was this kid who basically slept wherever she fell asleep. Right. So if I fell asleep on the sofa, I fell asleep on the sofa. So I was that kind of child, didn't have a great deal of routine. We weren't a routine family. But in my sort of older years, I have realized the importance of a routine and what it can actually bring to me. And the thing is about a good daily routine is it can help us cultivate good habits of self-care, which is so important. I have worked out that it is really important that there should be a time to relax, that regular bedtimes are a good thing, regular walks are a good thing, regular eating habits are a good thing. People are naturally creatures of habit. And the thing about routines is they offer a way to promote health and through a sort of structure and through an organization. And really, having a routine can greatly improve your health if you build in time to make sure that you take care of yourself, self-care. And the thing is, many people who don't have a routine are all over the place. It's very stressful sometimes because when you don't have a routine, I like lists these days as well, but when you don't have a routine, so lists are part of my routine, but when you don't have a routine, your head is full of, when will I get it all done? Will I get it all done? Poor sleep is also a terrible reaction that comes from lack of routine. Yeah, poor eating, same thing. Poor physical condition, same thing. And the thing is, when we don't have a routine, it's an ineffective use of time. Yes, it is. And without even realizing it, many people have a routine. So, if you work a 9 to 5, chances are your alarm goes off at the same time. But also, there's nothing wrong if you're somebody who sticks by routines religiously. There's nothing wrong in shaking it all up a bit. Instead of, say, having dinner at 6 or 7, have it at 4, whatever. Do you see what I'm saying? Set the alarm half an hour earlier so you can appreciate the birds singing out there. And you have to be aware of a routine loop as well. So I'm only talking about routines in terms of kind of shoring up our lives and creating stability. That's important, right? And and if you really want to introduce some spontaneity into your life, if you are a routine person, do things like, as I say, set the alarm earlier, order different dishes, eat different food, right? So all of these things in our lives, our health and well-being, can all be improved by good routines, right? I'm literally not talking about a routine to death, right? I'm just talking about simple things that you have in your life. What I said at the start, right? I walk my dog at certain times. I like that of the routine. It feels I see some of the same people. That's lovely as well. We develop relationships. Lyra says my routine is dictated by my lifestyle and I follow what my mind and body tell me. You sound very in tune. Just be spontaneous, says KB. Red Scotland said routine is critical. Even changing a routine is still the incorporation of a routine. Excellent point. It's the routine itself which is key. Earth is cyclical. Routine is at the center of everything all of the time. Beautifully articulated right there, right? Beautifully articulated. I have friends that feel guilty for not being busy, says Shanti. Insane. Literally, people at the end of their lives do not say, I wish I'd have been busier or I'd have spent more time in the office, right? They just don't. So, but the thing is, yet again, there's no wrong or right answer. I just think that introducing some daily routine, if you're a bit all over the place, will be really helpful and can really help you just to manage your time better. If you have a problem with time management, by the way, a good routine will get you in order. Yes, it will. Absolutely will. We are in a post-truth age, says Rowie. And Buzzacino said, if you learn from the past, mistakes and growth, and plan for the future, foresight and awareness, you can live better in the now, making wiser choices. Thank you, Space Cat. I really like Sonia's wisdom at the end of these streams. This is just everyday wisdom kind of stuff, right? Is that I'm not an academic. Well, actually, I am an academic. I did actually do a psychology degree, but clearly my language isn't academia, just regular person. But I just think that psychology and stuff like this is just really important. Marie, don't feel guilty for not working. You're lovely, Red Scotland. You are. Beyond Belief said we are in the intellectual dark ages. If I wear a mask, it might protect me from catching selfitis, says Craig. Shin said without routine, life's a mess. Prioritize what's important. Julie, Beautifully said. That's it, isn't it? Because also when you develop a routine, that's when you start to see what is important to you. Absolutely. And just to say, wonderful people, I'm not going to be here on Friday. I'm in court for 2 days. I will update my legal page, my fighting fund this week and after the hearing, and as soon as I'm able. I think we've got a link to my fighting page. So please feel free to look at that either later today or tomorrow. And I will update a little bit of detail about what this week is about. And of course, I'm going to end on a quote because that's what I do, right? It's a Vince Lombardi quote, and it's about winning, right? Because I believe that you lot out there are winners, right? And Vince Lombardi said, winning is not a sometime thing, it's an all-time thing. You don't win once in a while. You don't do things right once in a while. You do them right all the time. Winning is habit. Unfortunately, so is losing. So you know what to do, people. Make winning part of your daily routine, right? You've got this. Thank you for all the wonderful comments today. Thank you for the contributions, greatly appreciated. And thank you for being you and being here with me every Monday and Friday. Love you lots. And because we're doing a pre-record, it will enable me to do some interviews that I'm not necessarily able to do when we're live. And one of them is with Peter Hyatt, brilliant statement analyst, who is going to be analysing the whole Jay Slater case. You notice I didn't do a Jay Slater update today because Peter is going to do a deep dive for me on the analysis of the statements around that, and also update on Madeleine McCann. And really looking forward to that. Thank you, Marie, and all of you wonderful, wonderful people. And have a great week. I will see you live next Monday, but Friday's show will be up as usual at 9 a.m. on Friday. Take excellent care of yourself. God love you all.